Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Qatar, and the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Støre. Thanks. Thanks, Mohammed. Good to see you again. A decade ago, the Middle East and the crisis in the Middle East was at the center of this conflict. Today, it has stiff competition. US politics, the war in Ukraine, the menace that is Russia. But the crisis in the Middle East persists. War in Gaza, fighting between Hezbollah and Israel, the Red Sea becoming a conflict zone, with the Houthis, and low-level escalation that we've seen between the Americans and Iran and its proxies. And as General Petraeus often says, and he's fond of saying, the Middle East does not play Las Vegas rules. What happens there doesn't stay there. Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed, I'd like to begin with you. I mean, Qatar really has been at the center of the crisis in Gaza. You've been at the center of negotiations. Can you begin by telling us how close we are to a deal and what are the prospects?
Well, first of all, Yalda, thank you for having me today in the panel, and I would like also to thank everyone here. Actually, I think we are, the time is not in our favor. We made some good progress in the last few weeks in the negotiations, and we've been trying to reach an agreement between the two parties, yet the last few days has not been progressing as expected, and I believe there are still differences in place. If we look at basically the agreements that we had earlier in November, when we managed to get 109 hostages out, and we had this pause, this humanitarian pause for a week. It always has two elements in any agreement. One is addressing the humanitarian condition in Gaza, and the other one which really reflect the numbers of the people who will be released in exchange of the hostages. I believe in this agreement we are talking at a bigger scale, and we still see some difficulties on the humanitarian part of these negotiations, that we see it really going to enable us and to help us in making sure that we are putting enough pressure to reduce and to get the numbers down. Now, if we are able to reach in the next few days some good conditions on that side, I believe that we can see a deal happening very soon. Yet, the pattern in the last few days are not really very promising, but as I always repeat, we will always remain optimistic, we will always remain pushing. We will try our best to put a closure to this. We believe that the humanitarian suffering in both sides is not something easy to be handled. The humanitarian situation in Gaza, and especially when it comes to Rafah, and now we see the population over there, it's a dire situation, and we are seeing, a very threatening moments if plans in Gaza will happen.
You say the last few days haven't been going well. What are the obstacles?
Well, I cannot disclose much on the details of the negotiations, but as I mentioned, we believe that if we are able to reach an agreement on the humanitarian side of the agreement, I don't think the numbers, they will remain an obstacle, but yet it won't be the biggest obstacle. I think the time is not in our favor. As I mentioned, Ramadan is also ahead of us now, and also as situation in Rafah evolving, that will be very, very dangerous for the entire region.
But when you say, it's the humanitarian situation that you're not satisfied with, what is the actual issue?
Well, I'm trying to avoid, getting into details of the negotiation, respecting the parties of the negotiations, but yet I think that if we can address and signify the humanitarian package within the agreement, we will be able to get through the obstacle of the numbers. That's basically our focus these days.
Prime Minister, do you think America is being too soft with Israel?
Are there any Americans in the room? Well, I think the Americans are in a very complex situation, and I think it's from the messages from the first day of what I would call obvious and necessary solidarity with Israel after what happened on the 7th of October. I think that is really a starting point that sometimes is being lost from the bigger picture, what really happened on that day and what that created of an atmosphere in Israel. And with the bonds between the US and Israel and between all of us who have been friends with Israel, we need to get on the inside of that trauma. So that being said, I think the objective stated by the US since October and until now on the 5 rounds of Secretary Blinken's visit, I think it's a major challenge for US credibility here, because there have been clear expectations and then you see that what is expected is not happening. I think that is a big challenge, and that's where I salute what Qatar is doing and what is attempted to be done to facilitate progress in this extremely complex situation.
What should they do? How should they ratchet up pressure?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, the US is a major financial support to Israel, major support on the military side. Part of what is landing on this theater in Gaza is US produced. So again, it's a balance between the solidarity of a country that has been attacked in a terrible way, has the right to defend itself, and then to find this balance with what humanitarian law implies. And from my side, I would say that has gone too far. It is not proportional. And it is for the security of Israel in the future, I think it is a deep and major and extraordinary problem mounting now from the 2 million people who both have been exposed to brutal urban war. And again, some of them being human shields of Hamas fighting, but still with so much destruction and now suffering, that it's going to create a security challenge for generations.
I mean, we know that the Americans have the most amount of leverage, but so do the Europeans. What should you be doing?
Well, again, the Europeans is not one thing here. I think we've seen that been exposed time and again, and in a way, I think it is a sometimes misunderstood position of being what it means to be a friend and sympathetic to things. I mean, sometimes I think there needs to be quite straight language. I think this issue of getting humanitarian aid into a population that is in these dire conditions is absolutely paramount. And there should be, in my view, a clearer unified voice, clearer votes on that. And then, of course, clear expectations that the negotiations, which are very delicate, that go on to get hostages out and to bring this war towards something that can be settled, so we can go on with the next stage, which is to say, what will this look like in the future? Because now it is a very short-termism, and I think that's also combined with the political situation inside Israel.
Sheikh Mohammed, Israel has made it very clear right from the outset that any further negotiations, whatever it may be, when it comes to the Palestinian cause and situation, will not include or involve Hamas. Do you think that's realistic?
Well, I think that to be realistic, when we are going to start a negotiation about the Palestinian state or the Palestinians' future, if we look back in the last 3 decades now, we've seen that we are just going into a cycle which never resulted in anything or any progress. It was the contrary. We have seen an increase in the number of settlements. We have seen continuous violations on the holy sites. We've seen provocations happening from time to time, settler violence. We have seen that how many wars that we've been through in the last 30 years, and yet we always see on, that talking about the two-state solution is not anymore something happening. We hope that this and now what happened after October 7th and the war in Gaza will represent a wake-up call that the situation is not sustainable and we need to step up and to look at a better future for the people in the region, whether it's the Palestinians, the Arabs, the Israelis, everyone. What we want to see a better future for everyone. Now, on the issue of Hamas being part of the problem or being part of the solution, what we are talking about the Palestinian representatives. That's basically the PLO, the one who is representing the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people in everywhere around the world. They are the organization that's mandated for the negotiations, and I believe that whoever the Palestinians are agreed on should be included in that, and it's the Palestinian decision to decide who's being part of them or not. And I think that the Palestinians, they have the same right as any other people or any other country to choose whoever is participating with them or not. Now, I just wanted to come back to a point where my colleague, the Prime Minister of Norway, has highlighted our biggest question and the biggest threat that we are seeing that there is a big question mark emerging within the people of our region, that since right now we see that the people in Gaza being killed, being displaced, and we didn't see the same stance that's happening in different conflicts when it comes to the issue and killing the Palestinian people. We see that there is an abandonment of the first principles of right and wrong, and we just judge without judging the act. I'm meaning not only Ukraine and other conflicts. We are not really looking at the act itself, but we always determine whether it's about the perpetrator and whoever is affected by these acts, and to decide whether it's right or wrong. And our people now are questioning our credibility as countries now. Did we step up and did enough to protect those Palestinian civilians over there? And whenever also they are seeing non-state actors emerging and doing things, claiming that these are to protect the people in Gaza, then how we are going to face our people by telling them we couldn't do enough, we couldn't help the Palestinians, but the others are trying to exploit the situation. So I think we are on a crossroads right now, and it's very critical that we stand for a rule-based international order that everyone is talking about here in Munich and in other events, and we don't differentiate, depends on who are the people who commit these acts or who've been the victims of the act.
Prime Minister, do you think that this is sort of the darkness before the dawn, that this moment, as tragic as it is for both sides following October 7, that this could be a moment where we could see the PA, for example, revitalized a two-state solution, security in the region for both Israelis and Arabs?
Well, let me come to that, but there can be dark times before even darker times. I mean, this is an escalation going the wrong way. Now, coming back to your point here, I think that our approach has to be that we have to work. I mean, Norway is from afar. We have had a long engagement with parties in the region, so Qatar and Norway are in different positions, but let's see how we can contribute. Now, take one part here, the PA. If the PA collapses, I believe it is a major danger for Palestinians and for Israelis. And the situation has been now for some months that Israel has withheld Palestinian tax money, 60% of what they need to pay teachers, police people, doctors, nurses. And in a few weeks, by and large, it will be broke and out of order. What will be the consequences of that? So the question is then, is the PA perfect? Is it organized as it should? Is it enough representative? It can be discussed. Are we served, or are people in the region served by seeing a PA collapse? I think it isn't. So Norway has been working now, and I hope we will be able to succeed soon to have a kind of intermediary role to get that money transferred to the PA. So there are certain elements we should avoid, collapsing. We have the whole other debate of UNRWA, which is obviously something that has to be looked into after 7th of October. The UN should do its investigation. But are we served by seeing this organization collapse for the 3 or 4 million people who depend on their services? I believe no. So we have to take things in sequence. And I think what is coming out of this initial stage, when we look ahead, and the countries in the region and we who have been leading the donor support group to the Palestinians, is that the vision of a Palestinian state is now stronger than it was before the war. But getting there is going to be extremely hard with the current political situation. So we have to rise above that situation, in my view, and start conceptualizing what that means. And it will mean profound reforms on the Palestinian side. You talk about having a PA that can be responsible for managing in Gaza.
Do you think it can? Because right now everybody is negotiating and talking to Hamas.
No, I think that is not present at present. And obviously I cannot see, seeing this from outside, I cannot see any future if there's going to be Hamas ruling Gaza. That is not going to work. And for obvious reasons, and I can understand why. So you need a Palestinian leadership which is sufficiently representative of the Palestinian people, who can be representative of the people living in Gaza, and can be supported by the international community and be relied on to be transparent, money flows and all the rest of it. And then there has to be expectations from Israel that you have to deal with this as being the representatives of your neighboring, not yet state, but people living close to you. And then I think, to address countries in the region, this donor support group that we have been chairing, I think has had far too passive contribution from the region itself. That may be changing now, because there's a new generation of leaders coming in the countries around who have to engage much more actively in something which I see as a combination of recognizing Israel, dealing with Israel, having normal ties, at the same time expecting that there's a Palestinian state.
At this point, I want to open the floor for some questions. If we can ask 2 or 3 questions, and I can bring it back to the panel. I believe there are microphones going around. Mina.
Thank you so much. Mina Al-Araybi, The National. Your Excellency, I appreciate you have to be very careful of what you can tell us about the negotiations. But the longer-term vision for Palestinian leadership, do you see this idea of a reformed PLO? Some people have said rather than the PA, reformed PLO. And with that, a message to the Palestinian people that we're all here, we don't see enough of their representation. How can we ensure that Rafah is not attacked? That is the most immediate concern.
Well, regarding the first part of your question, actually, I think that right now we are focused on the priority, how to end this war and how to avoid a further escalation. On the bigger question of the PLO and the PA, we believe that right now the PLO, as I mentioned, is the representative that's been recognized after Oslo as the representative of the Palestinian people. The PA is the authority that's governing the West Bank right now. Unfortunately, after the division, they are not governing Gaza anymore. We would like to see a unified Palestinian government that represents the Palestinian people that will be in West Bank and Gaza. And of course, all the Palestinians who are willing to recognize and subscribe to the principles of the PLO needed to be included and needed to be a representative organization for all the Palestinian people until they get into their statehood. Now, on the question of Rafah, we see no reason of the continuation of the war in the first place. And unfortunately, we know the importance and we recognize the importance of to have a deal on the hostages and get the hostages back to their families, but also we recognize the importance of stopping the war today, even without any preconditions. And we believe that stopping the war will bring the hostage back. A hostage deal will bring an end for the war, but we would like to see this is happening without any further excuses. Now, this is the dilemma that we've been in, and unfortunately, this has been misused by a lot of countries that in order to get a ceasefire, it's conditional to have the hostage deal. It shouldn't be conditional. What's conditional is the humanitarian catastrophe over there in Gaza.
Yeah.
How is the impact of some major power country like United States, China? We know the United States position. We know the Chinese position for this conflict. How do you think? How is it honest of the Chinese position to really China really want to solve this conflict? Because China one side trying to and support the Palestine and the Gaza, but other side, China today located 3 million Uyghur Muslim and the Turkic Muslim concentration camp in the 21st century. So one side suffering is a Muslim population, is own citizen. Other side support the Palestine. Or do you think it is really honors or this is really honor for these actions?
Okay, thank you, and I'll get a question from Hina as well.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to commend both the state of Qatar and Norway as being pragmatic leaders, and I think this is really something that needs to be celebrated, because the tribalism on human rights issue has consequences which are going to be far, far, far outreaching and intergenerational perhaps. So really just want to commend you on that. I just want to quickly ask perhaps two questions. This tribalism is leading to the victory of rogue states, whether you want to call it the country that attacked Ukraine or the country that is continuing to do unprecedented human rights abuse of the Palestinian people. And why I call it unprecedented is because there is perhaps no time in my living memory where the UN and the entire multilateral order or the multilateral system, the rules-based order that we talk about, has been screaming that this needs to stop and has been given evidence over evidence, including the ICJ. And the reaction of the holders of the rules-based order and propagators of human rights seems to be missing. Now, I'm concerned about the precedent setting of self-defense being carried to an extent where such immolation of people can be stood by, and what this creates for the future of conflict, of peace in the world that we live in.
Okay.
So, Prime Minister of Qatar, my question to you, I guess, would be that on Russia, I think a lot of people would ask that Human Rights Council, in many other places, there was active movement to, to various ways to try and stop or to try and give some sort of punishment, right? And on the question of Israel, I think a lot of people are looking towards Muslim countries who have the wherewithal to see what has been done. And I understand the need for negotiation and the need to continue to move forward. Lastly, just one brief comment. It is absolutely right, and I can be perhaps, understand completely when people say that Hamas cannot be part of a future solution or negotiation. But wouldn't the same token then require that the state of Israel, which is now amassing such massive human rights abuse, may also not be part of any future negotiation if we were to take the same logic forward? So just, that question. And to you, Prime Minister of Norway, I've already asked the question, that don't you think this precedent setting of the use of self-defense to this extent is dangerous in an intergenerational way?
Prime Minister, perhaps I'll get you to respond to that, and then we'll address the other questions.
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, present action in any setting is based on precedents. And we have precedents every day, every week, every month coming up, adding to the value of jurisprudence, so to say, in terms of action. So yes, you're right. But that's why I think it's important to say that you have a right to defend yourself, but the international community has the right and the obligation to say when proportionality is broken. And I think we have done that in the majority, and more should do so. And you can understand when you are in this kind of frenzy, which this is, that is something that the international community has to be there to help the parties to understand where are the limits. But I don't think necessarily that this will be a precedent with credibility, you know, for future situations, and no situations are similar. But you know, we believe that there has been a breach of that proportionality, and the human consequences of that in the first instance are extraordinary, and the security implications of that again for the self-defender is also, you know, on the negative side.
Prime Minister, I guess you touched on you know, how you can be answerable to your people and the international community's sort of leadership on this. But if you had any further comments, and then I guess if you wanted to touch on the Uyghur question.
Well, I think that, look, as I mentioned, I think we need to apply the same principles to all of the conflicts, and that's the way we see it. That's how we evaluated our position when Russia-Ukraine happened. That's how we stand, and that's the way we kept standing. That's the same thing we applied it to what's happened in Gaza or in any other conflict. Our worry is that, you know, with all these reactions that carried with the war and with the current conflict in Gaza, our people started to raise a lot of questions about our friendship, our alliance, our partnership with countries in the West which are changing position just because those are different people. Those are us. It means we are less. That's the mindset which is, unfortunately, is quite dangerous for our future. The second thing, I'm talking about non-state actors trying to play a role in this conflict, and this is something that we've been warning from the beginning, that this conflict might have a spillover on the entire region, and we've seen this is happening right now, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Lebanon, whether it's in the Red Sea. Yet, us as a countries in the region, we are trying our best. We are doing everything we can do possible, but we are not creating any change. So what would be our position, or how our credibility will be judged in front of our people? That's becoming a bigger question for all of us. On the gentleman who asked me about China, I think that when it comes to the foreign policy on different conflicts, that's the area where I can comment, and we see the China position on the conflict in Gaza right now, or it's overall on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's a position that we respect. We've seen it very supportive and aligned with the position of the Arab states. But your question on an internal matter that relates to China, of course, this is something where I'm not in a position to comment on right now. And I believe what we judge right now on the current conflict, what are the foreign policies of different countries.
We've got a couple of minutes. I believe we have a question there. I'll take one more question. Sorry, in the red. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Aliza Binoun, and I must say that I find it very difficult to hear the distinguished panelists and also the mood here in the room. I want to remind everybody that on the 7th of October, people were killed in their bed. Heads of Israelis were beheaded. Breasts of women were cut off, and they played with it like football. And today, Israelis don't feel safe. My children don't feel safe. I think that we're entitled to feel safe, and I think that we're entitled to live in security. So proportionality, Mr. Prime Minister of Norway, yes, we do what we do with very close legal advice, army people, foreign ministry people, and if that wouldn't have been done, I think that the toll would have been much higher. Yes, we do care about humanitarian aid. Trucks are pouring into Gaza. Why hundreds of trucks are stuck 20 kilometers after Rafah? Why the UN is not taking care of distributing the humanitarian aid? Because there is a will to put pressure on Israel from the UN. We heard the Deputy Assistant of the Secretary General just a few days ago saying that Hamas is not a terror organization. Of course, it's not a terror organization. It's a Mother Teresa. So I would like to say that we have, yes, we have the right for self-defense. We have the right to live in peace in our country. We don't want war. Israel is a democratic country. And I'm a little bit, puzzled from the atmosphere that I feel in this room. Just to remind everybody that we have our rights as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We do only have 50 seconds left on the clock before I bring in the next panelists. But if you had some closing remarks.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to, say a final comment. We feel for all the people. The crimes are condemned, whoever is the perpetrator, and we feel for the victims. And also the suffering on the Israeli side or on the Palestinian side. What we want a better future for everyone and everyone to go back to his home safely.
Prime Minister.
Okay. I just want to express, my deep sympathy for what you're saying, what you have experienced. I have had first degree witnesses telling me many of these stories, and I'm very clear in condemning that. It's a hideous attack, and it can only be described. And again, Israel has the right to defend itself. But it's not end of story. That's my point. And when we make our positions clear on this, it's also because we care about Israel. And, we are a voice, we can express ourselves and believe that, in order to provide security for Israelis in the future, which we really care about, we believe that the course of this war is not taking us in that direction. Then one can agree or disagree on that, but, I don't question your story at all.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Sheikh Mohammed and the Prime Minister of Norway.
Thank you. Very good to see you.